name is Riley Anderson. I'm 52 years old and work as a shift manager at a small bakery on the outskirts of Charleston, South Carolina. And today, I'm standing at my daughter's wedding. An extravagant ceremony held on the beach at Hilton Head, where golden sunlight stretches across the water. Gold-plated chairs are lined perfectly beneath imported floral arches, and tuxedo-clad servers weave between crystal-covered tables. I stand in the middle of it all, holding a glass of champagne. The pearl-colored dress I bought from a discount store 3 weeks ago doesn't match the Oscar de la Renta gowns around me, but I didn't come here to stand out. I came for my daughter, Natalie. Natalie is my only child. I raised her with my own hands, with every hour from my night shifts at the bakery, and every tip I scraped together over the years. Today she's a radiant bride in an intricate lace gown that cost nearly 3 months of my retirement income. And she just married Brandon Pierce, heir to a luxury hotel chain, sunglasses permanently hooked on his collar like the sun never shone too brightly for him to squint. Just as the reception shifted into dinner service, Brandon approached me with a glass of champagne. He smiled, but not with his eyes. "Miss Riley," he said, "there's one small thing I need to clarify." I took a sip of my drink, keeping my expression steady. "Go ahead." To make everything today as perfect as it is, Natalie and I went a little over budget. She mentioned you'd help cover part of the wedding costs. He paused, then smirked. "Just around $48,000. I froze. "I'm sorry, what?" Brandon didn't blink. "You've been here, eating, drinking, witnessing all the beautiful moments, so I thought, maybe consider this your wedding gift. If not, no problem, you can simply step away from our new life. Permanently." I hadn't even responded when Natalie stepped in, holding her husband's hand. She looked at me with a gaze colder than the ocean breeze. "Mom, it's reasonable. You don't want to be a burden, right? You said you wanted a peaceful retirement, maybe in an assisted living home with professional care?" My chest tightened. My feet were planted, but the world tilted around me. Natalie wasn't joking. Her voice was calm and cutting. I looked at the 2 young people before me. My daughter, the one I once held through fevers that kept her from sleep, and her new husband, now staring at me like an unpaid invoice. I used to imagine Natalie's wedding as a joyful day, where I'd sit in the front row holding her hand before she walked down the aisle. But reality was, I was being handed a bill surrounded by violins, ocean waves, and champagne toasts from people who didn't even know my name. I took another slow sip of champagne, no rush to respond. The sea breeze brushed past my shoulder, carrying the salt and the years I had traded so she could have this moment. I leaned slightly forward, my voice low but firm. "You've both forgotten one very important thing." Brandon's brow furrowed. Natalie's breath hitched in the humid air. The words weren't loud, but they sliced through the air like a silent alarm bell. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to argue. Because what they were about to face had been in motion long before this day. Quietly, carefully, without a single misstep. I walked away from the reception hall, following the curved stone path that bordered the lawn, the wind from the water cool against my neck. Behind me, the music and clinking glasses played on, as if no one realized a storm had just been set in motion. But I knew. And the storm didn't come from nature. It came from betrayal, from memory that doesn't fade, and from a mother who had been silent for far too long. I sat on a wooden bench facing the water. The sunset painted the ocean gold. Heartbreakingly beautiful. I could have cried. But the tears had stopped 18 years ago, the night I held Natalie and ran from our home. I was 34 back then, with nothing but empty hands, a 4-year-old daughter, and bruises still fresh on my arms. My ex-husband, Eric, hadn't always been abusive. But years of unemployment, liquor, and bitterness had turned him into a shadow that darkened our home. I used to think if I endured long enough things might get better. Until that winter night when Eric shoved me to the floor for spending $20 on cough medicine. Natalie stood at the stairs, her stuffed bunny Mimi slipping from her hands, watching me with a fear no child should understand. That was when I knew. If I didn't leave, she would grow up thinking that was love. That night, I packed a few clothes, a savings book with $312, and Mimi, Natalie's only friend. We took the last bus to Columbia where I knew no one. The first apartment I rented was barely bigger than a closet, smelled of mildew, and had such low water pressure that even bathing was a negotiation. But it was quiet, no shouting, no fists pounding on doors. I worked morning shifts at a diner. In the afternoons I learned how to handle dental tools at a clinic, organizing appointments. At night I cleaned the home of an elderly couple in exchange for a few dollars in leftovers. Every evening I came home exhausted, but always told Natalie a new bedtime story to lull her to sleep. I remember the first time she brought home a paper with a big red A. Her first spelling assignment in first grade. "Mom! My teacher said I got every word right!" I taped it to the wall right next to a faded photo of the two of us back in Charleston. The frame was torn, the print smudged, but it was the only piece of the old life that remained. Every milestone Natalie reached I held close. The hand-sewn dresses for school events, birthday cakes made from discount aisle ingredients, her first winter with a brand new coat, a gift I saved for over 3 months. I didn't allow myself to fall apart. I had promised her, "You will have a life I never dared to dream of." By 9th grade, I opened our first savings account titled College Fund Natalie Anderson. I added whatever I could, sometimes $3, sometimes $5, after every extra shift. At 16, she got a summer scholarship to a private academy in Raleigh. At 18, she was accepted into Duke University's communications program. The day I dropped her off at the dorms, I hid my tears as I turned to leave. I still remember Natalie turning back and hugging me. "You'll always be the first person I think when I make it." I believed her. As my daughter stepped into her dream, I stayed in the background, proud to play the quiet supporter. I picked up evening shifts at a nearby grocery store near campus, sending her a few $100s each month so she wouldn't have to work. Natalie called every week, sharing stories about her classes, her new friends, and her dream of one day starting her own media company. I lived for those phone calls, clinging to the belief that no matter where I was or what I was doing, my daughter would never forget the mother who laid the first brick of that dream. I was wrong. I brushed windblown hair off my cheek, my heart quiet like the sea before a storm. Brandon didn't know my past, but Natalie did, and yet she still stood there, holding her husband's hand, looking at me like I was just an empty wallet. I tightened my grip on my purse. They thought I was weak, but they didn't know. I had faced darkness and walked out of it, and this time I would do it again. 3 years after Natalie graduated, she opened her first clothing boutique, The Golden Thread, on King Street in downtown Charleston. It was a pricey, bustling corner where even major brands like Kate Spade and Anthropologie tread carefully if they couldn't keep up. I remember the night she called, nearly midnight. Her voice was a mix of excitement and anxiety. "Mom, I found a storefront, prime location, but they'll only hold it if I place a deposit within 3 days. "How much?" I asked, my hands still dusted in flour as I prepared the morning's delivery. "Almost 80,000, then with renovations, inventory, equipment, it'll come to around 97,000 total." That number hit me like a knife. I glanced toward the corner of the room, where I had hidden a thick envelope containing every dollar in my retirement savings, money I had scraped together over nearly 20 years. I had planned to use it to retire early, maybe open a small seaside pastry cart and live in peace. But my daughter was chasing a dream, and I had once sworn I would never let Natalie's dreams die because of money. I called Adrienne, my best friend from high school, now a legal assistant at a law firm. She was the one who had helped me escape my marriage years ago, laying out every legal step I needed. "I need your help drafting an investment agreement," I said. "I'm going to fund Natalie's boutique." Jean was silent for a few moments before answering. "Riley, if you're putting everything in, then you need to retain control. I'll draw up an investment contract. You'll hold 51% ownership. Natalie runs day-to-day, but any major financial decision must have your approval." I didn't want to control my daughter, but I wanted to protect both of us. On the day we signed, Natalie was too excited to read the fine print. She just smiled brightly and threw her arms around me. "I won't let you down, Mom." 3 months later, The Golden Thread officially opened. Natalie wore an elegant white dress and delivered a heartfelt speech. I stood quietly at the back, clutching a bouquet of wild daisies. The local news reported on a young female entrepreneur launching an independent fashion boutique in the city center. No one mentioned an investor. No one asked about Natalie's mother. I told myself it didn't matter, her success was my reward. In the early months, the store struggled. I secretly sent extra money to help cover her rent. I didn't say a word. Never asked for recognition. Then one day, a local influencer posted a photo wearing one of Natalie's designs. It exploded overnight. 3,000 shares. By morning, customers were lining up at the door. Within 6 months, the Golden Thread became Charleston's go-to fashion spot. Southern Flair magazine called Natalie the rising star of Southern style. I only visited the boutique at night to help with inventory, fold clothes, clean mirrors. Natalie sometimes said, "You should come by during the day, meet the customers, network, people would love you." I smiled and declined gently. "This is your stage. I'm happy behind the curtain." But one evening I arrived earlier than usual, planning to surprise her with dinner after a record-breaking sales week. I slipped in quietly, standing behind a rack of blouses. A customer was chatting with Natalie near the register. "So, how did you get started? Was it hard to fund the shop in the beginning?" Natalie smiled and shrugged. "Oh, it was tough, but I did it all on my own. No loans, no help. Just determination and vision." I froze. Under the boutique's warm lights, my daughter erased me from her story. Not a single word about her mother. Not a mention of the woman who sacrificed both her youth and retirement for the store that bore Natalie's name. I turned and walked out in silence. Outside, the night wind swept through the empty streets. I walked home without turning on the lights, without dinner. That night, for the first time in years, I couldn't sleep. Natalie didn't need me in her version of success. But what she didn't realize, I was the one who wrote her opening chapter. I stared at the contract in my desk drawer, the signature Riley Anderson 51% ownership still staring back like a silent reminder. I had never wanted to use it. But now, I wasn't so sure anymore. David Lancaster entered Natalie's life like a sudden gust of wind, sweeping everything off course before I even realized it. I met him at a young entrepreneurs networking event in Charleston, where Natalie was being honored as a top under 30. I stood in a corner, wearing my oldest intact navy dress, quietly proud, clapping like I always did. David approached me first. His eyes scanned me quickly, like he was appraising me, but his tone was polite, measured. "I'm David Lancaster Real Estate Investments. And you're the mother of the Golden Thread's founder?" "Yes," I answered briefly with a nod. I'd seen men like David before, polished, talkative, and always throwing around numbers bigger than they needed to be. That evening, Natalie beamed as she told me, her eyes lit up with excitement. "I love this, and he said my boutique has potential to grow. Can you believe it, Mom? He just finished a lakeside hotel project in Greenville and now wants to invest in lifestyle ventures. And my boutique? It's exactly his style." I nodded lightly, masking the flicker of concern rising in my chest. 3 weeks later, David became a regular fixture at the boutique every afternoon. Before long, he was also frequently staying over at Natalie's apartment on the 3rd floor of an upscale building. Natalie referred to him as her strategic advisor. But to me, I was starting to feel quietly pushed out of every circle. I continued reviewing the financial reports Adrian sent me each quarter, and I began to notice the line items: investment research, market consulting, site survey expenses for potential land in Asheville. The wording seemed harmless, but none of it had anything to do with fashion or a boutique. I asked Natalie about them. She laughed. "Don't worry, Mom, it's part of the expansion strategy. I'm learning to build a full-scale brand, not just a shop anymore. David's helping me a lot." I stayed silent, not because I believed her, but because I knew when someone doesn't want to hear the truth, no reasoning will matter. Everything unraveled late one night when I dropped by Natalie's apartment to deliver new fabric samples. She wasn't home. The door was unlocked. I planned to leave the bag and head out, but her laptop was open, the screen glowing, displaying a spreadsheet titled Financial Management Phase 3 Family Capital Strategy. I sat down, my hand trembling as I scrolled through the neatly written strategy. Gradually reduce R.A. Riley Anderson's administrative access over the next 2 quarters. Private meeting with new investors. Objective is to eliminate 51% original stake and restructure ownership. Leverage emotional ties to delay suspicion. Subtly manage financial contributions from Mom Riley to avoid pushback. I clicked over to the next tab, faintly labeled F-Mom GMT. It wasn't a budget sheet, it was a manipulation blueprint. Step 1. Propose that Riley sign a legal support authorization so David can manage investment decisions, drafted and ready. Step 2. Offer Riley the title of honorary partner, symbolic, with no actual authority. Step 3. Suggest a retirement stipend to mask the removal of ownership rights. One final note, highlighted in red. Must be completed before the wedding. Relationship management becomes easier once family status is formalized. I closed the laptop and stood, as if I had just stepped out of a nightmare. Wedding? Natalie hadn't said a word about getting married, but now it was clear. Everything was scheduled. And me? I was the final piece to be eliminated. I went home and sat in my kitchen all night under the dim overhead light. In my mind, I kept seeing Natalie at age 4 clutching her worn stuffed bunny, calling me a superhero for making heart-shaped bread. And now? The same girl, standing with a man I barely knew, ready to erase everything I had built without a second thought. The next morning I called Adrienne. My voice was calm. I need to activate the control clause and initiate a full audit of the boutique within 14 days. Adrienne was silent for 3 seconds, then she asked, "Are you sure?" I replied, "They just tried to turn me into a customized retirement stipend. I think it's time I speak." And this time, I didn't need to be angry or raise my voice. I just had to turn the right key. What Natalie and David didn't understand was, I had started from nothing before, completely alone. If I had to, I could do it again. Without them. Without anyone. I left the reception table amid cheerful music and polite laughter, still holding my champagne glass. My heels tapped softly on the stone floor, each step extinguishing the prideful flame Natalie and David had just lit. I didn't head for the restroom like I'd said. I walked straight toward the shoreline, where the late afternoon light spilled gold across the water. The breeze carried salt and a rare clarity, cutting through the chaos wrapped in white satin tablecloths behind me. I opened my phone and tapped a prepared series of messages. The final one contained just 3 words. "Sandcastle time." Not 10 seconds later, Adrienne replied. "Understood. Everything's in place. Are you okay?" I stared at the screen, then lifted my head and took a deep breath. The wind tousled my hair, but my hands no longer shook. I typed back, "I'm fine, let's begin." It had all started 4 months earlier, right after the night I accidentally discovered the F-Mom GMT spreadsheet on Natalie's laptop. I'd gone home, sat in silence all night in the kitchen, and the next morning, I brought an old notebook to Adrienne. I don't just want to take back control. I want the whole truth exposed, quietly. No one should see it coming. Adrienne flipped through each page I had filled with evidence. Photos of emails between David and a group of investors, payment receipts from the boutique to an account under a shady construction company, even a voice recording of David speaking with a broker where he hinted at the plan to phase out the old lady once the Asheville development deal was complete. One by one, I gathered the evidence in silence. No rage, no confrontation. I still showed up at the boutique in the evenings like always, still made tea for Natalie when she came home late. But behind the scenes, Adrienne and I were preparing everything. Legal files, audit notices, proof of embezzlement, temporary asset freeze orders, all printed in sets, sealed and ready. Only one thing remained uncertain: when to act. "You need a moment clear enough that everyone understands why you did it," Adrienne said. "When they don't just want to steal the company, but want to sever the mother-daughter bond." And this afternoon they said it out loud. David demanded I pay $48,000 as a condition to remain part of my daughter's life. Natalie suggested I should enjoy a quiet retirement, a polished way of saying I was being pushed aside. That was enough. When I returned to the wedding area, the light had faded into a soft amber hue. I took the longer path, walking behind a line of trees, eyes scanning every movement. At the front desk, staff had already been instructed to quietly hand out sealed envelopes to specific recipients, a few boutique shareholders, 2 financial journalists in attendance, and most importantly, Mr. and Mrs. Lancaster, David's parents. Each envelope contained the full investigation package: unauthorized fund transfers, secret investor deals, asset manipulation without majority shareholder consent. Then, the boutique system, triggered by Adrian's legal team, sent a wave of emails. The message was brief. The Golden Thread Boutique is temporarily closed for internal investigation. All assets, transactions, and staff activities are frozen per Clause B4 of the ownership agreement. A gust of sea breeze swept across my chest, lifting the weight I had carried for years. And for the first time, I no longer felt pushed aside. I was at the center of my own life, and this time, I had chosen the exact right moment to step forward. Waves still murmured in the distance, but within the sunlit courtyard of the wedding the air turned cold, like the calm before a storm. The ivory-colored envelopes were handed directly to selected guests: boutique investors, a financial fund director Natalie had met a few times, and of course, the Lancasters. I stood off to the side, fingers gently gripping my purse strap, watching. David was chatting with 2 older men when a front desk attendant approached and politely handed him an envelope. At the same time, Natalie received a message on her phone. I knew what it said. The boutique system had sent the official notice. Full audit activated, operations suspended, accounts frozen, and temporary control assigned to the majority shareholder, Riley Anderson. Within less than 5 minutes, the once lively reception turned eerily quiet. Whispers rippled, followed by cautious glances. Some guests set down their glasses, pulled out their phones. Natalie's face went pale as she reached the bolded sentence: "All transactions paused pending internal investigation." I walked slowly toward them, stopping just a few feet from my daughter. David turned, met my gaze, and for the first time that ever-present confidence drained from his face. "What? What the hell are you doing?" he snapped, trying to keep his voice low enough not to draw attention. I set my champagne glass down calmly on the nearby table and replied, "I'm protecting what I built. Whatever you're planning, it won't happen." Natalie staggered over, clutching the envelope she had just received, her lips trembling. "Mom, you can't do this. This is my wedding day." I looked at her, not angry, just deeply disappointed. "I didn't ruin today, Natalie. You did. When you chose someone who wanted to turn your mother into a burden to be erased. And today, you're just reaping the result of that choice." Across the lawn, Mr. Lancaster slammed his hand on the table. His voice rang out clear. "David, what is this? You used your wife's boutique funds to invest in that Southridge disaster? Did you really think no one would notice?" David rushed over, trying to pull his father aside, but it was too late. All eyes were on them now. Some guests began rising from their seats. Someone whispered loud enough for others to hear, "Did they embezzle funds? I invested in that boutique." The tension escalated. Another front desk staff member hurried over to the group of investors, handing out more envelopes, each containing financial reports signed by me. An older woman, the first independent investor who joined 3 years ago, approached me, handed back her envelope, and said, "Thank you for stepping up when it mattered. I suspected something was off, but no one dared cross David." Natalie gripped my wrist tightly, her beige manicured nails shaking against the wrinkled skin she'd never paid much attention to before. The bride of this $1 million wedding now looked like a child left behind in a crowded market, dress dirtied, eyes wide with panic, voice cracking. "Mom, you can't let it fall apart like this. I need you. Tell me how to fix it. I'll give you anything, money, shares, a title. Take it all, just please stop this. Please." I looked down at her hand clutching mine, then up into the face of the daughter I had once stayed up all night just to keep warm because I couldn't afford to turn on the heat. Her eyes were red, mascara smudged, but what held me silent wasn't her disheveled appearance. It was how late her desperation had arrived. I gently pulled my hand away, not with force, not with anger, just with the kind of quiet finality that cuts deepest. You want to give me money? I asked, not waiting for an answer. I gave you money 18 years ago, when I ran from an abusive man with $200 crumpled in my palm and your stuffed bunny clutched in your arms on a midnight bus. That was the first investment. Natalie froze. Then came college tuition. Then the boutique. Every time you called at midnight, I picked up, even when my hands were still covered in flour. I took a deep breath, the dust finally clearing from my lungs. You don't owe me money. I don't need money. I need to be seen as your mother, as a real part of your life, not a default tool or some milestone you mention when convenient then erase when not. Mom, Natalie whispered, her lips trembling as if trying to say something she'd long forgotten how to express. I shook my head one final time. I gave you everything, Natalie. My whole life. But now? I looked deep into her eyes. The same eyes that once lit up with joy whenever I brought home a second-hand dress when she was little. It's time I keep something for myself. The chaos around us continued, David being pulled aside by his father, a few investors quietly leaving the reception, the music now just background noise under the pressure of urgent phone calls. But inside me, everything had settled. I turned away. No goodbyes, no final embrace. Not even one last glance at the daughter I once believed was the center of my universe. I walked past rows of white chairs, expensive tablecloths, and imported floral arrangements already wilting under the golden sunset. I took off my heels and carried them in one hand, letting my bare feet touch the warm sand, like a quiet release from the role I had worn for far too long. In the distance, the waves kept rolling, indifferent to who had just been exposed, who was crying or who was pointing fingers. I kept walking, never looking back. I had spent my whole life giving, and today I left with nothing but myself. And for me that was enough. 3 months after the wedding fell apart, I moved to a small seaside town called Seabrook, about 2 hours from Charleston. A quiet place free from neon signs and rush hour honking. Just the scent of salt in the air, the cries of seagulls, and winding brick paths where people still greet each other in passing. I rented a small pale moo house with a front porch full of lavender and petunias. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine, under my name, no one else's. No conditions attached. The $48,000 David once demanded from me at the wedding? I used that exact number for something they never saw coming. Opening a boutique of my own called June and Thread, named after the month I was born and the first spool of thread I used to sew Natalie's preschool dress. I didn't choose a bustling downtown or Target trend chasers. I opened my shop on a quiet corner next to the local bookstore, a place where middle-aged women, retired teachers, single mothers, and young women leaving the city behind could stop in and find a linen dress that fit just right, a hand-embroidered handkerchief with their initials, or simply a cup of warm tea, and someone who truly listens. I didn't need floor-to-ceiling windows or glowing signage. I needed time, not to prove anything, but to fully live. For the first time in over 30 years, I didn't have to wake up at 4 a.m. for back-to-back shifts. I didn't have to count every dollar before sending Natalie her tuition money. I didn't have to hide my pain just because my daughter no longer wanted to mention her mother in her story of success. I handpicked every fabric, sat beside my old sewing machine each morning. My hands were still calloused, but they no longer shook. There were still slow days, delayed orders. But I didn't panic. I knew how to start over. One late autumn afternoon, Adrienne came to visit. She brought 2 bottles of red wine and a tight, knowing hug. "I'm still shocked you actually walked away from the golden thread," she said as we sat on my porch, legs propped on the railing, wine glasses in hand. I smiled. I didn't walk away, I just changed direction. She needs to understand the true value of things, and that's not something she can learn if I keep rushing in to save her every time she falls. Adrienne nodded, her voice slowing. "Has Natalie reached out?" I looked up at the sky, now glowing with soft orange light. "Yes, a handwritten letter. Long one, but I haven't read it yet." "Why not?" "Because I'm not sure if it's an apology or just another pitch." We sat in silence for a while, then Adrienne said, I don't think you have to forgive her right away. But I do know this, she'll never underestimate her mother again. I laughed, not out of triumph, but because I knew Adrian was right. And I also knew that no longer mattered. A week later, I got an order from a woman named Clara. In her message she wrote, "I'd like a simple olive-colored dress, nothing flashy, just something that fits." Like finally knowing who I am after years of being lost. I read that message 3 times. Maybe I wasn't the only one who'd ever lost herself. And if June and Thread could be the starting place for other women to find their way back, then every sacrifice, every storm, was worth it. I don't know where Natalie is now. The old boutique is under audit. David vanished from the media after a private investor lawsuit. I don't follow the news anymore. What matters to me is this: today, I get to sit still, listen to the rhythmic click of my sewing machine, let the scent of herbal tea drift across my little store, and know everything in this space was made by my own hands. Riley's story is a powerful reminder that unconditional sacrifice should never become an excuse for others to devalue us. In real life, too many people, especially mothers, lose themselves by always putting others first. But once we dare to stand up, set boundaries, and live for ourselves, it's not selfish. It's strength. Because sometimes the bravest thing isn't forgiving. It's knowing when to walk away and begin again, for your own sake. What do you think about Riley's decision? Would you have done the same in her shoes? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to follow the channel for more real and meaningful stories about family life.